The cheers from the radio are loud enough to vibrate the water in my glass. I do not touch the glass. 2,000 miles away, at the Grand Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, the wealthiest people in America are weeping. They are laughing. They are singing my song and falling in love with a smile they will remember for the rest of their lives. The white ushers at those velvet ropes do not care about Walt Disney's personal praises. They see the color of my skin. Tonight, I am the star of the biggest motion picture in this country. And I am sitting in a segregated room in Los Angeles, listening to them celebrate what I built from 2,000 miles away because the state of Georgia says I am not permitted inside the theater. My own brothers call me a traitor. They say I sold my soul to paint a pretty picture over a plantation. But something deep in my chest, not pride, not bitterness, something older than both tells me I planted the seed of God's grace inside a million white children tonight. Which of us is right? By the end of what I am about to tell you, you will have to choose a side. My name is James Baskett. And this is the story they locked in a vault. I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, in 1904. The son of a man who worked with his hands so I would not have to. I came to Hollywood not as a star, I came as a voice. A small voice. The casting call said they needed someone to speak for a butterfly. One butterfly. 12 seconds of screen time in a film no one had heard of yet. I walked into that studio on a Tuesday afternoon in 1944. I did not walk out until Walt Disney himself had come down from his office to listen. He did not ask me to be the butterfly. He asked me to be Uncle Remus. I want you to understand what that name meant in 1944. Uncle Remus was a character from stories written by a white man in 1881. Joel Chandler Harris set on a Georgia plantation, told through the mouth of an old black man who loved his masters. That was what the script said. That was what the country expected. What I decided to do with it, that is where this story begins. The year was 1944. The war in Europe was still burning. 14 million black Americans were living under Jim Crow law. Lynchings were not history yet, they were newspaper headlines. The NAACP had been fighting for anti-lynching legislation for 40 years and still had not won. And Walt Disney wanted to put a smiling old black man at the center of his biggest film. I said yes. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I tell you why. I had read the script 3 times before I agreed. The third time, I read it the way my grandmother taught me to read the Bible, not for what it says, but for what it means. The plantation was there. The white children were there. The cheerful old black man was there. But underneath all of that in the folk tales Uncle Remus tells was something else entirely. Brer Rabbit. The small one who outsmarts the powerful. The one who cannot fight with strength, so he fights with his mind. The one who is thrown into the briar patch, the very thing his enemy uses as a weapon, and walks out free. I had heard those stories in my grandmother's kitchen, not in a book. I knew what they were. They were survival theology. Every generation of enslaved black people had passed those stories mouth to mouth. Not because they were charming. Because they were instructions. how to endure, how to outlast, how to plant something in the mind of the powerful that the powerful does not even notice taking root. And now Walt Disney wanted to put them on the largest screen in America. I made a decision. I would not play a servant who loved his masters. I would play a man who loved children. All children. I would make Uncle Remus the kind of grandfather every child wishes they had, wise, warm, unafraid, and I would pour into his eyes something that no camera in 1944 had ever captured in a black man's face on a major studio film. Dignity. Quiet and absolute. I rehearsed that look in my mirror for 3 weeks. Walt Disney watched the first day of principal photography and did not speak for a long time afterward. Then he said, "That is the performance I did not know I was asking for." He gave me the voice of Brer Fox as well. I played both sides of the story, the wise elder and the cunning predator, and I understood, in my body, why that was right. Because every black man in America in 1944 had to be both, just to survive. The song came later. Zippity-doo-dah. I want you to hear it the way I heard it the first time the pianist played it through, not as a children's song, not as a Disney melody. Hear it as a man who has survived something unsurvivable, singing because silence would destroy him. Hear it as a testimony. My oh my, what a wonderful day. Plenty of sunshine ahead in my way. What does a man say when the world has given him nothing but darkness? He names the light he intends to find. He sings it into existence. He makes his faith into a sound the whole world can hear. I believe that certain groups were doing my race more harm and seeking to create dissension than could ever possibly come from Song of the South. I believed it then. I say it now. Not because I was blind. Because I had counted what it would cost and I had decided the seed was worth the soil. The film wrapped in the spring of 1946. Walt Disney sent a car to my house. Not a studio car, his personal car. He came himself, sat in my kitchen, drank coffee my wife Margaret made, and told me that what I had done was something that would last 100 years. He said, "James, you gave the character a soul." I believed him. I had reason to believe him. The preview screenings were extraordinary. Children, white children, black children, children of every kind were watching Uncle Remus, and something was moving behind their eyes. Something was softening. A girl in Pasadena, 8 years old, reached up and held her mother's hand during the scene where Brer Rabbit gets thrown in the briar patch. Her mother told a reporter. She said, "Mama, he's going to be all right, because he knows something they don't know." 8 years old. She understood. I thought, this is what I came to do. For 6 months in 1946, I walked through the world believing I had done something that mattered. That the smile I had built so carefully, the dignity I had pressed into every frame, was traveling through the dark of movie theaters across America and landing in young hearts like a seed lands in soil. I thought the battle was won. If you believe someone you love needs to hear this story today, share this video right now. That is your blessing to give them. Here is the question I leave you with. Team A. Was his performance an act of spiritual liberation? a man of deep faith planting seeds of grace and dignity in the hearts of white children who would grow up to vote, to hire, to judge. He took a stereotype and made it human. Team B? Or was it a gilded cage? A black man's God-given talent used to make a brutal plantation system look beautiful, only to be locked away by a corporation when the conversation became inconvenient? Faith without systemic challenge is just comfort for the oppressor. 2,000 years of faith. 400 years of struggle. Tonight, it is your turn. Then November came. The telegram from Walter White at the NAACP arrived on a Thursday. I did not read it until Saturday. I had been trying to find a doctor who would see me. My heart had been irregular since the summer, and 3 physicians in Los Angeles had turned me away. The 4th agreed to see me if I paid in full at the door. I paid. Then I went home and read the telegram. The film gives the impression of an idyllic master-slave relationship, which is a distortion of the facts. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Not because it was untrue, but because the man who wrote it had never been in that studio, had never watched a white child lean forward in her seat, her whole body believing that the small one would win, had never understood that you cannot shout a plantation out of existence. Sometimes you have to rewrite what happens inside it, one child's imagination at a time. The premiere of Song of the South was set for November 12, 1946. The Fox Theater in Atlanta. 2,000 seats. The governor of Georgia in attendance. The most celebrated film event in the South in 20 years. But I was not there. The state of Georgia did not allow black people to sit in the same theater as white people. Walt Disney knew this. The studio knew this. So they didn't even buy me a train ticket. Walt Disney's personal praise could not change a state law, and his studio's budget did not extend to challenging it. I sat in my living room in Los Angeles, 2,000 miles away, and listened to the radio broadcasts of the white stars walking the red carpet, while the song I built with my own breath played in a room I was legally barred from entering. Everything I have just told you is true. Every word. The dignity I pressed into that role true. The children who felt something move in them true. Walt Disney in my kitchen, calling what I had done a soul true. And this is also true. I was 42 years old. My heart was failing. The doctors I could afford told me I had perhaps 2 years if I rested. The doctors I could not afford might have given me more. But here is what no one speaks about when they argue over Song of the South. I did not have the luxury of choosing between compromise and integrity. I had the luxury of choosing between this role and no role. Between this check and no check. Between a medicine I could almost afford and one I could not afford at all. Walter White was not wrong about the system. But I wonder, sitting here in this room, with the rain coming down and my heart doing what it does now, whether he ever had to make the particular kind of choice that is made from inside a burning building. Everything I just told you is true. But so is this. There is a document they do not want you to read. Not a secret document. It is sitting in the Library of Congress right now. It is the original telegram from Walter White to the Associated Press, dated November 1946. In it, He does not attack me by name. But he describes the character I played, the character I spent 2 years building into something I believed was human and dignified and alive, as a dangerously glorified image of the Samba stereotype. Samba. I want you to sit with that word. The same word that had been used to dehumanize black men for 100 years. The same word that meant, you are not a person, you are a prop. You exist to make the powerful feel comfortable. And some of my own people looked at what I had done and said, that is what you are. I did not answer them publicly. I gave one statement to the press and I went home. The statement said what I believed. It said that the film could do more to open white hearts than 20 years of editorials. I believed that. I still believe the intention was real. But intention does not live in a vacuum. Song of the South did not premiere at a neutral location. It premiered in Atlanta, Georgia, the heart of the Jim Crow South, as a deliberate commercial strategy. Disney's distribution team had calculated that Southern white audiences would be the film's most profitable market. The choice of Atlanta was not artistic. It was financial. And so my dignity, my 2 years of work, my grandmother's survival theology pressed into a performance, all of it was placed in the service of selling tickets to an audience that would walk out of the theater and go home to a world where black people could not sit in the same section as them. The seed I thought I was planting, they watered it with the wrong water. Here is what happened to my body during the production of that film. I played 2 voices simultaneously, Uncle Remus and Brer Fox. Live-action scenes and recording sessions, sometimes on the same day. The studio schedule was built around the child actors' school hours, which meant I had no consistent hours. I worked when they needed me. I had been told by a physician in 1944 that I had a congenital heart condition. I had been told to rest. I had been told to avoid sustained stress. I did not rest. I could not afford to rest. In the spring of 1948, 18 months after the premiere, in the middle of the NAACP boycott, while Song of the South was simultaneously being celebrated in trade magazines and condemned in black newspapers, Walt Disney nominated me for an Academy Honorary Award. Not a competitive Oscar. An honorary one. The kind they gave when they wanted to acknowledge someone without placing them in competition with white nominees. I accepted it. Of course I accepted it. The ceremony was March 20, 1948. I was 43 years old. I had lost weight. My hands were not steady. I walked to that stage at the Shrine Civic Auditorium in Los Angeles and I received the first Oscar ever given to a black male actor in history, almost a decade after Hattie McDaniel faced her own trials. I smiled. That is what the photographs show. What they do not show is that I had to sit down immediately afterward. 4 months later, I was dead. July 9, 1948. Heart failure. I was 44 years old. Margaret, my wife, was left with the bills and the photographs and a statuette that the country had already begun to forget. But wait. There is something historians have been quiet about for decades. In the years between the premiere and my death, Disney did not offer me a contract for another film. The studio that called my performance a soul did not call again. I was available. I was experienced. I had just received the highest individual honor in American cinema. They did not call. What they did do was release Song of the South again. And again. 4 theatrical re-releases between 1946 and 1986, each one generating revenue that never found its way to Margaret's store. And then in 1986, after a re-release at the 40th anniversary generated protest, Disney made a decision. They put the film in what they call the Disney Vault. They announced it would not be released on home video, would not be on VHS, would not be on DVD, would not, eventually, be on Disney+. They locked my face away. Not because they were ashamed of the system that produced the film. Because they were afraid of the conversation the film would require. There is a difference. I have thought, in the years since, about the children. The girl in Pasadena, 8 years old, who understood that Brer Rabbit knew something his enemies did not. She is in her 80s now, if she is living. I wonder whether she remembers. I wonder whether what she felt in the dark theater, that small recognition, that the small one could win, whether that was worth anything to her life. Whether it changed the way she saw black people. Whether it made her a better person than she might have been. I cannot know. What I know is that I made a choice in a burning building. I made it with the information I had, with the body I had, with the faith I had. I believed that a dignified black face on a screen seen by millions of white children was an act of resistance. Walter White believed that dignity cannot be performed inside a system built on your subjugation. Both of us were working from love. Both of us were trying to free the same people. And I died at 44, and he is remembered as a hero, and I am locked in a vault. I do not say that in bitterness. I say it because you deserve to know the full accounting. Donald Bogle, Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks. NAACP Official Records, Library of Congress. Walter White Telegram, November 1946. Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Honorary Award Records, March 1948. What stayed with me most about James Baskett was not the Oscar. It was not the premiere he was barred from. It was the fact that he paid a doctor in full at the door cash, up front, and then went home and read a telegram from his own people calling his life's work a samba performance. And then he went back to work the next day. I don't know what to call that. I don't know if it is faith or necessity or the particular stubbornness of a man who has decided that the only thing left in his control is the quality of what he makes. Now you know what I know. In 1948, a black man stood on the stage of the Shrine Civic Auditorium and received the first Oscar ever given to a black male actor in Hollywood history. He smiled for the cameras. He sat down because his heart was failing. 111 days later, he was gone. Disney made $38 million from that film. Margaret Baskett, his widow, received nothing after his death. The smile is now locked in a vault. Team A or Team B, drop your answer below. And tell me why. because James Baskett's name deserves more than a vault. Final image. A slow fade out of James Baskett's real Oscar photo. Transitioning to the heavy iron door of the vault, shutting in the dark. I was the star they celebrated, and the man they forgot. What the Lord makes beautiful no vault can hold.